Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. My name's Stefan and I'm joined by my colleagues Ben and Euan, and today we're here to talk about Phil Foden. Fresh off the back of a brace in the Manchester derby, Man United did go ahead with a goal from Marcus Rashford, and then Phil Foden entered the scene, scored 2 goals, turned the tie in his head before Erling Haaland made a third. And guys, Foden is really the talk of the town at the moment when it comes to the Premier League. Pep Guardiola said after the match that, how impressed he's been with him this season, how much he's stepped up. He's talked a lot about the way he's actually matured as well as a person, but perhaps the most significant thing he said, Ben, was that Phil Foden is perhaps the best player in the Premier League right now. You obviously... very intent on watching how Man City do from week to week. One of the title challengers. What do you think about that suggestion that Foden might be the best player in the Premier League this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive words from Guardiola. And to be honest, I think he's got all the ability to be the best player in the Premier League. And I'm perhaps surprised it's taken this long for him to be put into that conversation more regularly. I don't think he's quite there yet because I think you need to show it over a longer period of time. I think his teammate Kevin De Bruyne, for me, still goes in ahead of him. He's probably, for me, been the best player in the Premier League for 5 or 6 seasons now, producing it week in, week out. You can rely on him. I think if Foden can continue to be in this same position this time next season, he's a genuine contender to be in that bracket for the best player in the Premier League, alongside De Bruyne, alongside Mohamed Salah, alongside Rodri potentially, maybe Declan Rice, maybe Saka next season. But I think he's certainly got the potential to be the best player in the Premier League. Is he there yet? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put it, isn't it? Because it's kind of weird to talk about this almost being like his kind of breakout season, because he's obviously had so many impressive seasons at Man City. He's been a key player for them for a number of seasons. But if you really do kind of look at the stats in terms of his actual game time this season, it really is remarkable. I did an article for Transfermarkt on Monday looking at just how important he has been to Man City, and some of the stats were quite startling. For example, the goals and assists he's picked up this season equate to about 29% of Man City's total league goals, which I think his highest to date was 17% in his previous season, so almost double his normal contribution to the team from season to season. But I think the other thing that's really interesting as well is that if you look at how much game time, just sheer game time he's played this season, of the total available league minutes in the Premier League, he's got 91%. Last season that figure was about 51%. And another thing that's maybe quite interesting is if you kind of take his total league minutes and divide it by how many games he's played. Last season he averaged 58 minutes per game. This season he's averaging 91 minutes per game, which I think tells a really big story between a player who maybe started games last season but was probably one of Pep Guardiola's first substitutes in the second half of games, to a player who's now seen out matches, and as we saw against Man United, a player who's going on to win games as well. Euan, a large part of that's obviously because, De Bruyne has been out injured for so much this season. So many look at Foden as the kind of tailor-made long-term successor to Kevin De Bruyne. Do you think it's as simple as that?
I think stylistically he's maybe even more of a replacement for Bernardo Silva in the long term, but he's talking his goal celebration. I'm not having his goal celebration. I don't think that's iconic. He's pulling an arrow out and shooting a gun. So maybe that's one thing he needs to work on. But he's an unbelievable talent, Phil Foden. You pointed to the stats there. It's incredible how his usage and importance to Guardiola's up this season. Last year they didn't start the Champions League final. This season, if City get there, which they probably will, let's be honest, maybe one of the first names in the team sheet. He's just an incredible footballer. His technical ability is frightening, really. Could be a big few months for him as well, obviously, with England coming up in Euros as well. He's not always played under Gareth Southgate, but he's got to be started for England as well. He's that good. He's just a ridiculously good player.
Just a question for both of you two on that. If Man City were to go on to win the Premier League right now, who would you give Player of the Year to, provided it was a player from Man City?
Yeah, well, you kind of stole the words from my mouth there, to be honest, Ben, because I was kind of thinking that as things stand, you could probably make a pretty strong argument that he has been Man City's best player, perhaps their most consistent player, because obviously De Bruyne has been out injured, and there's such an interesting kind of narrative around Erling Haaland this season where he's still scoring a buckload of goals, but perhaps not as much as last season. he keeps making these huge kind of high-profile misses, as we saw in the Manchester derby, actually. There's a lot of discussion about him moving to Real Madrid. He's not really as infallible, if that's the right word to use, as he was last season. And if you kind of look through that squad, you look at the defence, there's kind of issues there. Midfield, maybe, I guess, someone like Rodri, who's just such a key, consistent player. But, as things stand, I would probably say, and this only really echoes what Guardiola said as I mentioned at the top of this video, if you had to pick someone from Man City, it probably would be Phil Foden, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for me, it's between Foden and Rodri. Like you said, with Haaland, I think because he has such a small influence on the game away from his goal scoring, I think players over 700 minutes played this season, he's got the lowest touches in the entire Premier League. So for me, his goal scoring has got to be astronomical for him to win that award, which it was last season. But this season, as you say, he's not running away with the Golden Boot race. Rodri, for me, I think is Man City's most important player and the hardest player to replace. But if you look at the performances, I think it would come down between Phil Foden and Rodri if Man City were to go on and win the Premier League, which I hope they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think Foden will get at the City with it because for multiple reasons, obviously being English as well helps. I think Declan Rice has been the best player in the Premier League this season. We're painful to say that, but he's really been excellent. But Rodri as well he doesn't play for City. You can see how much they miss him. He's probably the one player that we take him out of the team. He's a real downgrade in terms of the replacements because people like Kovacic and Nunez this season just haven't hit the grade for Man City.
Yeah, of course, Calvin Phillips, are they allowed to leave in January, which you can't imagine Pep Guardiola really allowing that with any other position, to be perfectly honest with you. Well, that's a really interesting way to maybe round it up. We can ask our listeners, or our viewers rather, who they think has been Manchester City's best player. Has it been Phil Foden? Do you think he's probably the front runner for the Premier League Player of the Year as things stand? Could it be Erling Haaland as the months roll on? Kevin De Bruyne's not wasting any time. He's bagged about 1 million assists since about the 2 weeks that he's been back playing. So let us know in the comments below how well you think Phil Foden's doing. Should he be Player of the Year? And of course, if you think he will lead Man City to another league title. And until next time, we'll speak to you guys soon.